We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. G20 leaders in Rio unite to tackle global crisis and promote sustainable growth. Call for humanitarian aid in Gaza and Lebanon amid escalating conflicts. Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlights India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty at G20 in Brazil, also calls for addressing the challenges faced by Global South countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds talks with President Prabowo Subianto of Indonesia and Emmanuel Macron of France and Prime Minister Luis Montenegro of Portugal and Giorgia Meloni of Italy. Russia-Ukraine war marks 1,000 days. Ukraine says war must be brought to just end in 2025. Lebanon Hezbollah agreed to U.S. proposal for ceasefire with Israel. U.S. envoy to travel to Beirut for further talks. And on to the top story this hour. G20 leaders attending summit in Brazil released a G20 Rio de Janeiro leaders declaration outlining their concerns over major global challenges and crises. Besides, leaders also talked about steps for social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty. As per leaders' declaration, the leaders underscored the G20 commitment to the importance of food security and nutrition and of the progressive realization of the right to adequate food, as reaffirmed through the Deccan High-Level Principles. The G20 group also launched the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. The leader called for speedy implementation of the G20 2023 Action Plan on accelerating progress on the SDGs. The leaders expressed a deep concern about humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and the escalation in Lebanon. While talking about war in Ukraine, the leaders highlighted human suffering and negative added impacts of the war with regard to global food and energy security, supply chains, macro-financial stability, inflation and growth. The leaders condemned terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Leaders also recommitted to advancing the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons and a safer place for all, and will uphold obligations in this regard. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Prime Minister spoke about India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty. Sharing India's success story, Prime Minister said that the main reason for India's success is its approach back to basics and march to the future.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The Prime Minister spoke on a number of issues, including India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty, amplifying the concerns of the Global South, push for sustainable development goals. The Prime Minister said that the people-centric decisions taken at the G20 summit in New Delhi have been taken forward during Brazil's presidency. The Prime Minister expressed satisfaction over prioritizing SDG goals. The Prime Minister said that India focused on inclusive development, women-led development, and youth power, and gave wings to the hopes and aspirations of the Global South. The Prime Minister noted that it is clear that one Earth, one family, one future is as relevant at this summit as it was last year. The Prime Minister also shared India's experiences and success stories. He said that over the last 10 years, India lifted 250 million people out of poverty, while over 800 million people are being given food grains free of cost. 550 million people are benefiting from the world's biggest health insurance scheme. Now, 60 million senior citizens over the age of 70 will also be able to benefit from free health insurance. Maintaining a focus on women led development and social inclusion, over 300 million women micro entrepreneurs have been linked to banks and given access to credit. Under the world's largest crop insurance scheme, over 40 million farmers have received benefits worth 20 billion US dollars. Under the farmer scheme, assistance worth over $40 billion has been given to 110 million farmers. Institutional credit worth 300 billion US dollars is being given to farmers. India is not only ensuring food security but also focusing on nutrition. The Saksham Anganwadi and Nutrition 2.0 campaign, which is an integrated nutrition support program, focuses in particular on nutrition for pregnant women, newborn babies, children under the age of 6, and adolescent girls. Through the midday meal scheme, special attention is also being paid to the nutritional needs of school going children. The Prime Minister said that India is also contributing to global food security. India provided humanitarian assistance to Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe recently. The Prime Minister noted that the main reason for our success is our approach back to basics and march to the future. PM Modi remarked that we have focused not only on natural farming and organic farming, but also on new technologies. Besides, India also focused on sustainable agriculture, protection of the environment, nutrition, and food security by promoting Shri Ann or millets. India developed more than 2,000 climate resilient crop varieties and has started the Digital Agriculture Mission. India's digital public infrastructure enables social and financial inclusion. Besides, India created a new model for inclusive development that strengthens the weakest link with the aspirational districts and blocks project. The Prime Minister also said that India supports Brazil's initiative for a global alliance against hunger and poverty. This is an important step towards the implementation of the Deccan High Level Principles for Food Security adopted at the New Delhi summit. The Prime Minister also highlighted the concerns of the Global South, saying that the countries of the Global South are most adversely impacted by the food, fuel, and fertilizer crises caused by global conflicts. He said that discussions can only be successful when we keep in mind the challenges and priorities of the Global South. And just as we amplify the voice of the Global South by granting permanent membership of G20 to the African Union during the New Delhi summit, we will reform institutions of global governance. With input from Gautam Roy in Brazil, Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral meetings with a number of world leaders in the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. Prime Minister met with French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Portuguese counterpart Luis Montenegro, and Indonesia President Prabowo Subianto. More in this report.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral meetings with a number of world leaders on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Prime Minister held talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron. The leaders agreed to advance cooperation between both countries in sectors such as space, defense, energy, technology and more. The leaders talked about how India and France will keep working closely in sectors like space, energy, AI, and other such futuristic areas. Prime Minister also complimented Macron on the successful hosting of the Paris Olympics and the Paralympics earlier this year. Prime Minister also met with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Prime Minister termed his meeting as extremely productive. Prime Minister said that for India, the comprehensive strategic partnership with the UK is of immense priority. Prime Minister added that in the coming years, both countries are eager to work closely in areas such as technology, green energy, security, innovation. Prime Minister also held a bilateral meeting with his Portuguese counterpart Luis Montenegro. The talks focused on adding more vigor to economic linkages. Sectors like renewable energy and green hydrogen offer many opportunities for more collaboration. The leaders also talked about strong defense relations, people-to-people linkages and other such subjects. Prime Minister noted that India cherishes the long-standing ties with Portugal. Besides, Prime Minister Modi also met with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on the sidelines of the G20 summit. The talks centered around deepening ties in defense, security, trade and technology. Leaders also talked about how to boost cooperation in culture, education and other such areas. Prime Minister said that India-Italy friendship can greatly contribute to a better planet. Besides, Prime Minister also met with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store. The discussions focused on ways to deepen India-Norway bilateral relations, particularly in trade and economic cooperation after the signing of the India-EFTA TEPA. The leaders also exchanged views on geopolitical issues. Prime Minister held a bilateral meeting with the Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. Taking to social media platform, Prime Minister said that this year is special for both countries as we are marking 75 years of diplomatic relations. Talks focused on improving ties in commerce, security, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, among others. Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday made a historic pledge of $4 billion to the World Bank's International Development Association Fund for the world's poorest countries. Biden announced the U.S. pledge during his final address to the Group of 20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. The amount exceeds the $3.5 billion that Washington committed in the previous IDA replenishment round in December 2021.
I'm proud to announce the United States is pledging $4 billion over the next 3 years to the World Bank's International Development Association. As my friend Ajay tells you, the IDA is the first responder to the world's poorest countries. I encourage everyone around this table to increase their pledges in December.
And moving on, Ukraine surpassed 1,000 days on Tuesday since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022. The fight continues with exhausted forces fighting on many fronts, Kyiv under constant drone and missile attacks, and politicians getting ready for Donald Trump to retake the White House in January. Whereas earlier, in a boost for the conflict-stricken country, U.S. President Joe Biden gave the green light for U.S. missiles to be used against targets deeper inside Russia, potentially limiting its options to launch attacks and supply the front. Though President Volodymyr Zelensky hoped to do its best to end the conflict next year through diplomatic means, but he has emphatically shut down any talks of a ceasefire before proper security guarantees are provided to Ukraine. And Lebanon and Hezbollah have agreed to a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire with Israel as Beirut residents grapple with intensifying Israeli strikes. A senior Lebanese official confirmed on Monday that a U.S. envoy is set to visit Lebanon on Tuesday for discussions on a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The visit, led by White House envoy Amos Hochstein, is expected to build on a U.S. ceasefire proposal submitted to Lebanon last week. However, the visit has not yet been officially confirmed by Washington. There was no immediate comment from Israel on Lebanon's latest assessment of the diplomacy. Well, Israel hit targets in the Beirut city limits for the first time in more than 5 weeks, killing 10 people in 2 separate strikes, including Hezbollah's top media official. World powers have said the ceasefire must be based on UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended a 2006 conflict between Israel and Hezbollah earlier also. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel's retaliatory attack on Iran last month degraded its defense and missile production capabilities and also hit an element of its nuclear program. However, Netanyahu added that Iran's path to a nuclear weapon has not been blocked. Netanyahu's Iran remark was made at the Knesset, Israel's parliament, during a session that was called upon in order to discuss 101 hostages still held by Hamas.
We will still be tested for our ability to thwart the Iranian nuclear program. It's not a secret. It was published. There is a specific component in their nuclear program that was hit in this attack.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Volunteer divers took to the waters of Milna Bay on the Croatian island of Brač, participating in an underwater cleanup effort. They found cans, glasses and plates during the cleanup, marking the fourth such initiative this year. The project aimed to address the growing environmental toll of tourism. Efforts like these aim to address the urgent need for action to protect the fragile marine ecosystem. Another dugong is found dead on an island of Thailand's Krabi province, the 35th death recorded along the Andaman Sea coast this year. Department of Marine and Coastal Resources officials said it was a female weighing around 60 kilograms. Shrinking sea grass sources has been blamed for the rise of dugong deaths, as officials found little or no food in most of the dugong's digestive tracts. And still to come in this edition of DD India Live. We'll tell you about all that's happening at the COP29 summit underway in Azerbaijan's Baku as it advances to health climate commitments. Philippines battered by Man-yi, the sixth storm to hit the country in span of 1 month. And in sports, tennis legend Rafael Nadal all set for Davis Cup action before putting an end to his storied career.
G20 meeting taking place in Rio on the 18th and 19th of this month. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be participating here as well, along with the leaders of the world's 20 largest economies, will be deliberating on key issues such as eliminating hunger and poverty, sustainable development. For all the latest on the 2024 G20 summit in Rio, join me, Gautam Roy, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Moving on, Germany and Finland launched a probe on Monday after an undersea cable linking the countries was severed, warning of the threat of hybrid warfare amid heightened tensions with Russia. The countries' foreign ministers said in a joint statement they were deeply concerned by the cutting of the communication link through the Baltic Sea, where tensions have increased since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The warning came after a joint investigation by the public broadcasters of Sweden, Denmark, Norway and Finland. The incidents come just weeks after the United States warned that it had detected increased Russian military activity around key undersea cables. And U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Monday named former Congressman and Fox Business host Sean Duffy as his pick for Transportation Secretary in the next administration. In a statement announcing Duffy, Trump described the Wisconsin Republican as a tremendous and well-liked public servant. If confirmed, Duffy will oversee aviation, automotive, rail, transit and other transportation policies at the department with about a $110 billion budget. Trump has vowed to reverse the Biden administration's vehicle emission rules. He said he plans to begin the process of undoing the Biden administration's stringent emissions regulations finalized this year. And we now tell you about all that's happening at the COP29 summit underway in Azerbaijan's Baku. On Monday, the letter of intent officially establishing the Baku COP presidency's Continuity Coalition for Climate and Health was signed. WHO Director General said the initiative unites the visionary leadership of 5 COP presidencies that span this critical time for action, underscoring a commitment to elevate health within the climate agenda. He added that this coalition represents a collective will to prioritize climate and health now and for the future. At the COP29, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure announced a total of $8 million in funding for 12 projects across 18 small island development states in the Caribbean, Pacific and Indian Oceans at the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. The funds pooled from India, Australia, EU and the UK mainly support infrastructure and capacity building. The funds will be implemented for projects such as strengthening resilience of key infrastructure like schools, hospitals, power systems, health, water security, many more. The funds are expected to get dispersed within the next 4 months.
Today we have announced the second grant, which is going to 18 countries for 12 projects. We want to make sure that we are supporting the right kinds of projects that are supporting innovative, good quality infrastructure resilient.
Also, the Green Climate Funds has partnered with the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment through funding and the empowerment of Pacific youth in leading campaigns on climate action in their respective countries. The Academy will support about 60 Pacific Islanders aged 18 to 30 to launch and drive public-facing campaigns to scale up climate action that is in tune with their respective cultures and traditions. GCF and SPREO believe that involving and supporting youth climate fights with funding is fitting and long overdue.
Initial seed funding will enable Pacific Islanders to identify, capture and tell their own stories of climate adaptation, mitigation, resilience and most importantly justice. Stories that will inform and inspire their own communities and those further afield. At the same time, this multi-year initiative will create employment opportunities and professional pathways for young Pacific Islanders across various disciplines, including digital marketing, project management and creative design.
Well, moving on, at least 8 people killed as Super Typhoon Man-yi hit the Philippine archipelago over the weekend, unleashing fierce winds and strong rains that triggered landslides and storm surges, authorities said. Man-yi is the 6th storm to hit the country in a span of 1 month. The local government has appealed for aid to help the affected residents rebuild their homes. On average, about 20 tropical storms strike the Philippines each year, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, flooding and landslides. And Tropical Storm Sara begins to move away from Honduras after leaving 1 dead, over 50,000 affected and destroying bridges. Storm Sara caused widespread flooding and infrastructure damage, leaving communities isolated in northern Honduras. Heavy rains led to the collapse of a vital bridge over a swollen river in the coastal town of La Ceiba, which cut off access to an entire community. The relentless rains that began overnight on Friday has swelled rivers, flooded homes and caused many destructions. And Nepal and India have agreed to better coordinate on border security and reviewed the work done in the past year in managing related challenges. The 8th India-Nepal SSB-APF coordination meeting concluded on Monday, also agreeing to ensure smooth movement of citizens of both countries across the open borders. The 3-day meeting concluded to take more effective measures on border crime control, information exchange, revenue leakage control, drug smuggling and control of the illegal entry of third country citizens. Works will also be done to make border security more organized, decriminalizing the no man's land area and taking joint initiatives to control human trafficking and gold smuggling. And on to some sports news now. The season-ending Davis Cup 2024 final, which is scheduled to start in Spain on Tuesday, promises to be an emotional affair for the tennis world as Rafael Nadal is set to bid farewell to the sport after the campaign on home soil. The 22-time Grand Slam champion announced in October that he would retire after representing his country for the final time on home soil in Malaga, bringing an end to one of the greatest careers the sports have ever seen. However, it still remains to be seen whether Nadal is fit enough to play a singles match for Spain against the Netherlands or whether he once again teams up with Carlos Alcaraz for the doubles. All right, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. Well, we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.